Welcome back to the Nebraska Shootaround podcast. I am your host, Jacob Bigelow. Joining me, as always, is Jacob Bigelow, and we would like to apologize for not having an episode last week, but I was kind of stuck at Pinnacle Bank Arena all week long covering the six-day Nebraska boys and girls combined state basketball tournament, and I was going to try to find time to record with Bigelow, but it just didn't happen. I barely made it through the week as it was. So here we are, a little late here, but we're going to get ready to put a bow on the 2021-22 Nebraska ball season. So Bigelow, good to talk to you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has, man. No, I of course had the busiest week of my life last week, so I couldn't come down to state, which was kind of a bummer, but so yeah, it has been a little bit, but yeah, we've got the end of what felt like the longest basketball season ever to talk about. The last game and a half was fun, and then the all too familiar second half letdown. But yeah, so I guess we can start with the fun that was Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament. Who would have thought that after everything that Nebraska went through this year, that by way of a tiebreaker, they didn't finish last in the conference. Depending on who you ask, it maybe would have been better for their tournament if they had finished last, but they came in as the 13 seed, took on Northwestern, and for the first 20 minutes looked like they were still the hottest team in the league, like they were
25 even. Yeah. First 5 minutes of the second half ended up being pretty good too. But yeah, I was watching this game back in the media workroom at PBA because I asked them if they could put it on there because there's no way I was going to be able to stream the game on my phone in that building during the state tournament. But I was sitting back there watching on TV, obviously no sound or anything, trying to follow along as best as I could while I was missing the one game from the week that I missed state coverage. But it was kind of felt like, oh, this thing is real. Here they go, and they are just taking it to them. And then the second half happened, and then specifically the last 15 minutes happened, and we saw Nebraska kind of reverting to what it was for most of the season. And the turning point was in the second half, they led by 50-35 with about 15 and a half to go after Kobe Webster, a Indianapolis native playing back at home, knocked down a three. And then Nebraska proceeded to give up a 14-0 run and turn the game from we're in control to here we go again. This is a dogfight, and we're going to have to make plays down the stretch to win. And they did not make as many plays as Northwestern did. And credit to Chris Collins throwing out, switching to a zone there, and kind of a 3-2 where the top of the zone was kind of playing back passive a little bit, and just giving Nebraska a look that I don't think it's really seen much of this season. And there were a few bad possessions, and then there were a few possessions where they got open looks from three, and they just didn't knock them down. And those shots had been falling for much of this run where they were playing decently, and they eventually stopped falling. And so gave a 14-0 run, so it went from up 15 to up 1. And it was close throughout. Nebraska got it back up to 5 a couple of times, but Northwestern knocked down back-to-back threes to take the lead. And then it was kind of back and forth down the stretch. And we saw Nebraska gave itself opportunities down in the final possession, final minute or so, but it was the worst version of Nebraska we've seen, where first Alonzo Verge kind of drove in out of control for a charge, and then on the next one, Trey McGowan's, who kind of got in there, drove out of control, and tried to force up a shot and got blocked at the buzzer. And that was basically game over. And Hoiberg said after the game that they had a play call there at the end, but they just didn't. I think Trey kind of called his own number, and it did not work well. So guards kind of driving in without a plan, out of control, and forcing up something that wasn't there. That is how Nebraska got to the point where it was 7-21 or whatever it was before that recent stretch. And it's just too bad they picked the worst possible time to kind of fall back into the old traps that they had been falling into all season.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you couldn't have said it much better. I mean, it just felt like they reverted to what we talked about on here for most of the year. And of course, it's against, Northwestern of all teams. At the end of the day, if looks like it probably wouldn't have mattered if they'd even made it past Northwestern, the way that Iowa came out and shot the ball the next day. And then the Hawkeyes go on to win the Big Ten as the 5 seed. But I mean, it just, all good things come to an end at some point. The run was fun, but eventually the magic runs out, and unfortunately it ran out sooner than most of us hoped. And now we are on to, well, I guess we can say for a minute, the game before this was cool. But there was contemplation of us doing an emergency podcast. Because of the game before this, they went on the road to number 10 Wisconsin without Bryce McGowan. Trey McGowan gets ejected, and they still found a way to upset number 10 Wisconsin on the road at the Kohl Center for the program's second all-time win at Wisconsin. I was there for the first one. I know how fun it is to win at the Kohl Center. So that game was crazy. But that feels like it was 6 months ago at this point. I'm sure it feels like even longer for you after a week at the state tourney. So, and then a full day of summer ball tryouts, but that's for another time. So, so that is how the season comes to a close. Obviously, you turn the page. You look forward to what this summer and going into next fall may bring. Here's a phrase we said this year far too much. We saw this with football. An embattled coach gets a new lease on life, and there's a plan that was agreed to, and there's changes that have to be made. With football, we saw that right away. Now we're about coming up on a week since Nebraska's season ended. We haven't heard anything official on any changes. We did see Trevor Lakes enter the transfer portal today. He will have to receive a medical red shirt to play again as a grad transfer. He could just never stay healthy, really, in his 2 years here. But so that, that leads us to a whole lot of question marks going forward.
Yeah. I think definitely we got some big questions to answer going forward. We know one guy that won't be part of the story moving forward is Alonzo Verge Jr. And quickly before we looked at it, I just wanted to kind of highlight his play down the stretch, and particularly in those last 2 games, even when Nebraska took that big lead against Northwestern, he was the reason why. He was kind of picking them apart, making all the right decisions. Finished with 21, 9 assists, 7 boards, just 3 turnovers in 38 minutes. Obviously didn't make the right play at the end, but I can't put that all on him. And he was phenomenal in that Wisconsin game at all as well. And that's the reason he was the reason they came back and won it. Because you look at that game, it wasn't a case of them hitting shots like had happened against Penn State and some of those other wins where they played well. They're only 5 of 18 from 3. So he really was the one that came over after Nebraska lost Trey McGowan's. Obviously, they're playing without Bryce McGowan's with the wrist injury, and he was dealing with the foul trouble. And he came back out and put the team on his back and carried them to the finish line. And he won't be back, so you're not going to have that guy doing that. But I kind of question for you is what we saw from this stretch run as we look ahead to next season and knowing it's going to be a different roster. Is there something during that stretch run that you can take optimism from, that you can kind of feel hopeful about, that like, hey, something here is, or there's something in here that we can carry over to next season they can use moving forward, that like, okay, now he kind of figured out, Fred Hoiberg figured some things out, some of the players that are coming back, some of these guys figured out what they need to do to get some wins in this league? Or do you kind of see more of it as what we saw last year, where guys got hot for a couple games. They won a few games against teams at the end of the season. Obviously, maybe some tired legs for some teams. You never know what's going to happen late in the year. I know Kobe Webster mentioned like the momentum that he saw at the end of the season was a big part of why he chose to come back for his extra year. And obviously that ended up not leading to anything the following season. There was no carryover from that. So is there something during kind of this stretch run that you saw as like, okay, this is kind of going in the right direction?
Unfortunately, not really.
Yeah.
I think my biggest takeaway from the stretch, and it's something we've harped on, something that anyone who's watched this team all season has said, I think it just puts even a bigger emphasis on the value of point guard play. Yeah. Because I agree with you that I think Verge was the catalyst for this run. The last time we were here, I talked about how we could see it in his eyes after that Iowa game. And that's what Fred Hoiberg kept on harping on, was that Iowa game was when the switch flipped, even though they lost. And I think Verge's play, obviously they brought him in late, and they had no idea what, the adjustment period to him being a Fred Hoiberg point guard would be. And obviously it took far longer than they expected and than anyone wanted it to. But I think we've seen now through, his improvement, what it's supposed to look like in the Big Ten. I talked about how, Fred's going to keep chasing the ghost of Monte Morris. And I think this stretch just makes it even, it was already priority number one in my book going into this offseason. I think it's even bigger that they have to go out and find a true playmaking point guard.
Yeah. And I would kind of right along those same lines with you. And I think it showed that when things click, what Hoiberg wants to do can work in the Big Ten. They beat teams from all over the conference. They beat bottom feeder. They beat the champion or co-champion or 2 seed, whatever you want to call Wisconsin.
The co-regular season champion.
Yeah. So it showed like when things click and they're kind of flowing there, they can be a good team. They can win games going this way, but they're going to have to find a way for the clicking to happen before the last couple weeks of the regular season. And they got to get the right pieces to allow it to click. And so you're not relying on things that hadn't happened all year to finally happen. And the point guard is the biggest question there and the biggest spot that they need to fill. Because I just don't know that you want to put that pressure on a guy like Ramel Lloyd to come in and have to be the starting point guard playing 32 minutes a night next season. And I know they speak highly of Karan McPherson redshirting the year, but I don't. It's a guy that hasn't played, didn't play at all this year. So you need to go out and I think find an experienced point guard and it can't be just go get the best player that you can get and plug him in, because that's what they just tried with Verge. And they kind of tried it with Banton as kind of more of an unorthodox style of point guard, which credit to Fred Hoiberg, he's had success with players like that in the past at Iowa State. But he's got to go out and find the right fit, a guy that can allow things, that can make things click. And it's not a guy that you're kind of teaching to be something that he hasn't been. And Verge credited Hoiberg for his growth as a player and kind of helping make him into more of a point guard and learning how to play the position better than he has previously. And that's great for Verge. I'm happy for him that he was able to kind of get something out of this year that he wanted to, even though they didn't get the amount of wins that I think anybody in the program was expecting. But Nebraska's got to start winning now. They got to go find somebody that is ready to play from game one and to be an impact player and to maximize all the guys around him. Because we've seen there are some pieces here that can be useful pieces on a winning team, but they have to be in the right roles and have the right guys around them. And it starts with that one position.
Absolutely. Yep. I couldn't agree more. So yeah, that's priority number one. Like I said, plenty of change, likely on the horizon. So we are going to wrap up do you have anything else to touch on, or do we want to go to where the fun begins? Actually, we do have one more thing to touch on. It's been so long that we didn't get to talk about Bryce McGowan's not winning Big Ten Freshman of the Year.
Oh, yeah.
You wrote a column going into last week about why you thought he should. Ohio State's Malachi Branham wound up winning the award. Bryce wound up being a third-team all-conference honoree, as well as the AP Big Ten Newcomer of the Year, correct?
Yep.
And he was the only Husker to receive any postseason accolades. It's not every day that the guy who leads the conference in assists doesn't even get an honorable mention all-conference. That would be Alonzo Verge as well. But yeah, that's not here nor there. That's just the Big Ten being the Big Ten. So
yeah, definitely kind of strange how, and like I wrote in that story, Branham made a legitimate case for it. And yes, we can point to the Player of the Week honors, but those were also kind of just determined by the league, I guess. Whereas the final award is voted on by the coaches, and I think coaches are going to pay more or credit winning more so than people that are just kind of looking at numbers and trying to basically pump up the league and advertise the league like, hey, look what this guy did in our league. It's kind of how the separate kind of awards look. And then obviously the AP vote was a completely different voting group, where that's the AP writers themselves kind of went through and determined that they wanted to give him the award. And it was a close one over Branham, according to Eric Olson's tweet. So Branham, he really did have a great conference season. I personally would have credited Bryce for his complete season and for being ready to go right away, because Branham was a complete non-factor the entire non-conference, basically up until that game where he played against Nebraska. And then suddenly he had that breakout and turned into one of the better guards, certainly among freshmen, but in the league as well down the stretch of the season. I think also when you kind of compare the roles and the level of difficulty they each face, that kind of played into my decision as well, or my kind of thought process in terms of I think Bryce deserved it, because he didn't have. You mentioned he was the only all-conference honoree. He didn't have a first-team all-conference honor. He didn't have an All-American sitting next to him, drawing defensive assignments and being at the top of the scouting report, like with Branham had with E.J. Liddell. So kind of all that played in. Ultimately, Branham was much more efficient than Bryce. He played on a better team, and he came on really strong in league play and kind of evened out the counting stats at least a little bit if you look at league play only. So it's too bad. I kind of feel like Bryce deserved it, but ultimately he did get recognition. He made third team, which not bad for freshmen to come in and be voted one of the 15 best players in one of the better conferences in college basketball. So still pretty impressive freshman year for Bryce, all things considered. It's unfortunate that he wasn't able to be healthy to close out the season. Is clearly the wrist injury that kept him out of that Wisconsin game. It certainly impacted him in that Northwestern game in the tournament. Definitely. He was just 2 for 10 from the field. Had a really nice finish late that was really important. That gave him a shot, but ultimately they just couldn't get the ball to go in. So it's unfortunate kind of final appearance for Bryce. That's the last game that he will likely play in a Nebraska jersey. But ultimately, I think he did about everything that he could have during his freshman season.
Absolutely. Just adds to the mystery question that we've all been asking of how will he be remembered. But that also is a good transition to how we'll wrap up today. So credit for this idea. I'm going to give a shout out to Dave Fight on Twitter at Fight Can Write. A couple days ago.
Yeah, great Twitter handle, by the way.
Absolutely. No. So a couple days after the season ended, he did a thread of Twitter polls. Of the 18 names on the Nebraska basketball roster, 15 have remaining eligibility to come back for next year. Alonzo Verge and Kobe Webster are done. Trevor Lakes would need a medical waiver. He entered the transfer portal today. So he did a thread of polls on if the fans thought that they would return. So we're going to play a little game of will they return? And the options we're going to do just like the polls, yes, maybe, and no. He did players. He said he filtered out bench guys and walk-ons. So Karan McPherson and Oleg Kjolnets are not on this list. I'm just going to say I'd expect them both to likely return because it's probably going to be hard to transfer anywhere when you didn't play all season. That's just my guess. He also included assistant coaches. So we're going to start. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Padilla, would you like to start with players or coaches?
Well, right off the bat, I guess we should probably just knock the coaches out there.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. So the first question asked was, will Matt Abdel Massey return to Nebraska basketball next season? The results of the poll, 54% said no, 14% said maybe, and 32% said yes. And I'm going to agree with the majority that he will likely not return next season.
I will agree as well. And I think we discovered on here as we record this on Monday that you won't find his Twitter handle active anymore. So that's certainly interesting. But I think ultimately this failed because they weren't able to put together a roster that meshed well enough with what Hoiberg wanted to do. Just the fit between Abdel Massey's recruiting, Hoiberg's coaching. It did some wonderful things at Iowa State. They had a lot of success together there, and they just haven't been able to replicate that in Lincoln. And ultimately, I think Fred's going to have to change the way he does things and operates the program to try something different, because the setup where you've got Matt Abdel Massey as essentially the general manager for the program, whereas the rest of the staff isn't really as involved with recruiting. Like Fred took the lead on some of their key targets. Like a guy like Isaac Trout was all Fred the entire time. But ultimately, I think he needs to rework the way he's done things so far in Lincoln. And I do think that was part of the changes that he discussed with Trev Alberts.
I would have to agree with that. I'm not going to name any names here, but when a priority recruit says that, he gets reached out to by the head coach of a program and another assistant coach, and they're under the impression that a guy whose job it is to recruit has been talking to said priority recruit for the last couple months, and he just hasn't done that, that's a gots to go situation. So we'll move on. The next question was, will Armand Gates return to Nebraska basketball? The only holdover from Tim Miles' staff, the only person on the primary staff that I got the chance to work with at Nebraska. The poll results were 48% said no, 37% said yes, and 15% said maybe.
Yeah, I think this is probably a no. I think it's more likely than Abdel Massey that he returns, but I think he like you said, he was the one holdover. He didn't have previous connections with Hoiberg. He's got a brother out there that's coaching his own program. We'll see kind of what happens. The coaches, the job openings are starting to kind of, we're hitting the coaching carousel now with jobs starting to open up, with coaches leaving. You never know kind of what openings are going to be created when the dust settles. Perhaps Dennis Gates gets a job. Perhaps Dennis Gates loses an assistant and calls his brother and brings him to work for his staff. You never know kind of how that's going to play out. But I think I could see him returning for sure, just if both sides kind of decide like, hey, this is the best option for both of us. But he is kind of unique among the members of those staff, just without the kind of shared history with Hoiberg.
Definitely, I agree. And when Coach Miles brought Coach Gates on staff, one of the main, selling points was his ties to two places. One was the city of Chicago. That's where him and his brother are from. It's where he spent, many years at Northwestern with Chris Collins. Coach Gates is also really well connected with the prep schools. Brewster Academy, that's one of the places that he had a very good relationship with. And we haven't really seen or heard anything about him recruiting at all under Fred Hoiberg. So maybe a reason for him to return would be, getting to recruit again. So I'm going to say maybe here. You never know. I'd say, you see his brother, Dennis, he's the head coach of Cleveland State. You've seen his brother, kind of as a name that's being floated for a jump from Cleveland State to a power conference job. And I'd assume if Dennis gets that call, he might, call his brother to come help him build a program. So I'll say maybe there.
I didn't realize that we were actually giving ourselves the option of a maybe. I thought we were going to have to get off the fence and make a call one way or the other.
So, you're calling me out, huh? You're calling me out, huh?
Yeah. I mean, I did hedge my answer as well, but at the same time, I also gave the answer first before I did the hedging.
Yeah. Okay. I will lean toward no, because I think Dennis will get a job. He did not get one last year. I think he will get one this year. This one we don't have to spend too much time on because we kind of have touched on it already. Nate Lenzer. This was kind of a resounding yes. He's the newest in the polls. That is 54% said yes, 30% no, 16% maybe. Nate's the newest addition to the staff. He just got there this past year. He's also been the most prominent public face of the program, aside from Fred Hoiberg, for the last couple months. So,
yeah, and considering that I just talked to him the other day at Pinnacle Bank Arena, he was kind of present there throughout the tournament. It's probably a good sign that that he's expecting to be here and to be recruiting for Nebraska, considering he was wearing red.
I would agree with that.
So
there also
was my official vote.
Yeah, my answer is yes as well. There was also a poll for Doc Sadler, who is not an official assistant, but he is the special assistant to the head coach, and he is getting a full-time assistant coach's salary, though he is not in an assistant coach's position. And this was a resounding no, 62% no, 25% yes, 13% maybe. And I will agree with the majority again and no onto that.
Yeah, I will also say no. It's kind of like, I think it's down, like, what does Doc want to do at this point of his life?
Yep.
It seems like he's kind of enjoyed just being around the program and being around the guys and all that, even though he's not in the active coaching role that he used to be. Doc's always wanted to make the most of a situation, have a good time, but it is kind of an awkward situation. I think, just like you said, making the full-time assistant role and a non-full-time assistant position, or salary and a non-full-time assistant position. And so I could easily see Doc just kind of like calling it a career. I don't know that he wants to get back into active coaching at this point. He agreed to the move in the first point, and I'm sure keeping the salary was part of that. Why not? You're doing different and less work for the same cost or the same salary, so why not?
Yeah.
But
Yep.
I think, 61. So like he could still certainly stay involved coaching somewhere, but I don't know that he's. Do you see him getting another head coaching job? I don't think at this point. I think
not really, unless somewhere he's been before. Like, I mean, I know there was like UTEP, when UTEP was hiring a coach, his name was getting thrown out there going back to UTEP, where he was before he was a head coach in Nebraska in the first place. But at this point, I'd lean toward no. I mean, he resigned, as a D1 head coach to come back to Nebraska to be in an assistant coaching role. So I would lean toward no. I have no idea what Doc would want to do at this point. He could probably, if he wanted to be an active coach, I'm sure there's someone out there who'd want him to be his their defensive coordinator. He's done a little bit of everything in coaching. After Nebraska, he was with Fred. He was Bill Self's direct director of ops for a year. I mean, he's done everything. So, but I would lean toward no on Doc. So that leaves us with some players. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 players. And I think we're going to start with the most obvious one, and that is Mr. Bryce McGowan's. Poll results 63% no, 14% maybe, and 23% yes. He's not coming back. He's gonna go get that bag. He's gonna go secure the bag and play at the next level, whether that be as a first round pick or a second round pick. We have seen the last of Bryce McGowan's, barring something unforeseen.
Yes, I would agree. And I think the stretch run that they had and the way that he played down the stretch only reinforced that the thought process for him of going in, and I think it certainly helped his stock a little bit just to kind of continue put that good play on tape, see the jumper fall a little bit more. And I think once he gets out there in front of scouts and they start looking deeper into a season, that he'll have a chance to second half of that first round, maybe kind of a priority early second round pick where he gets a nice little deal there in the second round. I think that's probably the most likely outcome for him, and move on to the next level, kind of make basketball his life. Whereas even like these kids going to college, obviously it's not like these guys are taking 21 credits per semester or whatever, but it's still, you got to put in the work to go to class, and some guys just not about that life. I think Bryce is a guy that loves basketball. Obviously, we've seen how much he's around the game, even when he's not playing it in himself. I think we're actually going to run my the feature that I wrote on Bryce and kind of being active in the community. We're going to run that in this month's Hill Varsity magazine. So if you'd like, you can pick up a copy of that. I kind of got a quote and updated the story a little bit after Bryce got to watch Keon Jacobson, a kid that he knows well from working with Thomas Vilianco, drop a record performance, 43 points. Bryce was sitting there courtside or watching it happen. So I talked to him about that. So, but yeah, I think he's ready to kind of move on and let basketball be the full-time focus for him.
I would agree. How about his brother? How about Trey McGowan's? The poll results for this one. This was probably the closest one in terms of the three answers. No was the majority at 42%, 33% yes, 25% maybe. I think the tone on this one has changed quite a bit. There was a point where it kind of, the feeling was, we could see Trey back. I don't know what may have made that change, but it's kind of feeling the other direction. So I'm gonna lean toward no as well.
Yeah, I will also say no. I think they came out, they got their chance to play together. Obviously, it wasn't as many games as they were planning on, but they did get to check that off their bucket list. And now I don't know what exactly is next for Trey, but I think he's also probably ready after a 4-year college career to kind of move on and see what's next for him.
Okay, we can kind of go rapid fire if you'd like, because I know you've got places to go, people to talk to. CJ Wilcher, I'd say yes,
Yes,
especially after his second half of the season. Derek Walker sounded more and more like yes.
I think he's the most likely of the guys with eligibility decisions to make to return. And yes, I agree with CJ, especially considering he's already used his free transfer. So that's something that you have to consider with some of these guys that have already transferred once. It's not as easy to leave and play right away once they do so. So CJ, I think a combination of his situation and the way that he played, I think he'll be an important part moving forward. And Derek, I think I think it's certainly returning. Obviously, kind of, I don't know what his professional aspirations are with basketball. This could be kind of a deal where
I don't know if he has any, because
that's
he's
what
talked
I mean.
about like I think he's talked about like, he wants to start a trucking company.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
I think if he can come back, it's kind of a why not? Like,
exactly.
So,
especially the player that he became and the role that he carved out.
Absolutely. He finished 6th in the country, and I think it was one of the field goal percentage stats. I forget what it was exactly. Speaking of guys who've already transferred once, Keon Edwards.
That's a tough one because, again, it didn't really click at Nebraska, but he also has already used his free transfer. But he was also a kid that enrolled early, and so this season should have been his first freshman year. And so it's a guy that still has some length and athleticism. So I'll say yes, just because he's going to have to sit if he goes elsewhere, most likely. But I don't feel as confident as I do about CJ.
All right, and then we've got 3 left. Two of them are thinkers. Keisei Tomanaga.
Yeah, he's the tough one because he was, as a JUCO player, he does have the free transfer available to him. Obviously, he had some stretches where things went well, but he also kind of fell out of the rotation. I don't know what other opportunities he might find out there, but what do you think on that one?
I would lean toward no, unless he really wants to embrace being like the third guy off. Maybe, like, I don't even know, like, because who knows what the roster is going to look like. Like, that's the thing, is like, he had a role this year because of the way the roster was constructed. If they're really going to, overhaul it and try to make it better, who knows where he falls in the pecking order. So I would lean toward no. Maybe a smaller school at the D1 level would take a chance based on his 3-point shooting. But I mean, I'd lean toward no.
Yeah, I think I'll go that way as well.
Lat Man.
I think he's done. I don't think he's going to come back. Season didn't go as well this year as it did last year. Wasn't able to build on that, unfortunately. And I think I think both sides are probably ready to move on from that partnership.
I agree. And last but certainly not least, I really liked the way this guy improved throughout the year, Eduardo Andre.
That's the interesting one, because if Derek Walker comes back and they add Blaze Keita, then those are 2 more experienced guys that are older guys that are ahead of him. And so if Derek chooses to come back and Keita makes it to Lincoln, then that would probably leave Eduardo as 3rd string at best. So he could see that and decide, maybe I look elsewhere, because he is a guy, he has a free transfer. He's been at Nebraska a couple of years now, but he started at Nebraska. So I think that is one that it could depend on what Derek, or he could see, Derek's got 1 year here. I could write it out, keep learning from these guys, keep trying to get better, and then see what happens down the line.
Yeah. Who knows? That's definitely the one I'm the most interested in, because I kind of liked the strides he made toward the end of the year. But could be a log jam if Derek comes back and Oleg stays and they add Keita. That's a lot of big bodies. But that is Nebraska Shootaround's version of Will They Return? Will we return? We don't know when. But
we can sort through that. We can talk about this off pod and figure out what we want to. We can probably dive more into the season. We can break it down through positions, different players. We can kind of figure out what we want to do with this. But yes, that is kind of a wrap on our first season of the Nebraska Shootaround podcast, which we've talked about doing for a while. I'm glad we were finally able to make it happen. Fortunately, we didn't get to talk about as many wins as we thought we might. But still, this was enjoyable. And shout out to those of you that have listened, and especially those that have wrote reviews for us. I finally went and looked at those the other day, and there's some nice ones in there. And kind of going through them, turns out I believe only 3 of them might have been related to one of us or been close friends with one of us. So 3 out of 8. So that's a pretty good ratio. I'll take that. That's like 5 random people who enjoy what we do and said nice things about us.
Yeah, not bad at all. Thanks, Dad, for yours. But everyone else, we appreciate you. We've had a lot of fun doing this. Like you said, thank you to those. Maybe we have some new listeners. I gave us a plug in a Twitter space after the Wisconsin game, but thank you to those of you who've been here since the very beginning. And maybe we'll have some off-season news to talk about. Maybe we'll have a deep dive into the season. Who knows? But we'll figure it out. Until next time, I just have to say thank you. Check out Jacob and the good folks at Hail Varsity. The story about Bryce is a very good read, and if it's running in the magazine, that's how you know it's good. So, thank you guys.
Yep. Thank you, and we will be back. Until then, this is the Nebraska Shootaround podcast.
A Hurrdat Media Production.